Hello. We are going to take another crack at this. Earlier today, we tried to have the off-season Q&A, and, well, it didn't go quite as swimmingly as we would have liked due to some streaming issues, but I feel confident that this time around I probably have figured out what the issue was. So, it actually looks like it's going pretty smoothly altogether, all told. Words, sentences. So we'll just get right to it here then. As mentioned earlier, and you've probably seen the news around if you've been paying attention to Indians Twitter or baseball Twitter at all, Brody Chernoff, Mike Chernoff's 6-year-old son, was on the air at the end of the game on, well, it was yesterday, talking to Tom Hamilton, and it was a pretty fun back and forth. He seems like a nice kid, a little bit shy, so he wasn't necessarily being too forthcoming with some of his answers until, as a joke, Hamilton asked, "So, are there any deals that your dad's working on now? Can you give us some details about any free agents he's trying to sign?" And so Brody comes out and says, "I know he wants Lindor to play 7 more years in Cleveland." So it seems like he may have accidentally revealed that the Indians are currently in talks with Lindor for an extension, which is great. I want Lindor to play in Cleveland for 100,000 years at 9 wins above replacement. If we can make that happen, I definitely think we should. Someone on Reddit said that you can actually hear Mike in the background go, "Hey!" He can't be that upset. And it was hilarious. And I don't think it's news to anybody that the Indians are trying to do that. It's just... I would love to hear Lindor's reaction to that, because in some ways he seems to me a lot like the type of kid... I bet he was the type of kid that would have done the same sort of thing, just not really thinking about it. Although Brody's 6 years old, so it's not like you can actually be mad at him at all. It was hilarious, and if you haven't seen it yet, I definitely recommend checking it out. If you go to the Indians Twitter page, they actually posted a link to the audio from it a little bit earlier today. I think it was around like 2:30, excuse me, that they posted that up. So, sounds like, or it looks like, we actually do have a good connection this time, which is somewhat miraculous for once. The fantastic thing is I think it's just that I had the wrong settings set up on the computer, so it's my fault for being an idiot. But we're going to work through that idiocy for some time, probably. And yeah, a couple comments coming in. Carrie points out that Tom Hamilton laughing. He basically laughed for the next 5 minutes, and I think they ended up going to commercial. And when they came back, he was still cracking up over it. And Frank points out that Brody claimed to be as fast as Tyler Naquin, and Nate says that Brody just became Lindor's best bargaining chip. So hopefully it ends up being a positive addition to the negotiations here. Moving along, I do want to touch base on our good friend Mr. Diaz of Yandy Watch 2017. He, as of Thursday, when I posted the last update to the watch, had a 5-game hitting streak going and was hitting .444 with an on-base percentage above 50%, which is nuts. I pointed out, yeah, it's spring training, so it's not as if we can proclaim that he's the next Brooks Robinson just yet. But it wouldn't be the first time that a player who's been largely overlooked to this point by, I don't want to say that the team's overlooked him, but not considered to be a blue-chip, 5-tool, super high-ceiling prospect, sort of comes out of nowhere in spring and just basically slugs his way onto the roster. The most famous examples of that happening, and I'm not saying that I expect this kind of career production from him, but Mickey Mantle just sort of showed up to Yankees camp and there's a great story about them playing an early game at USC, and he hit a home run that landed in the middle of the football field. So all the players just kind of turned and were like, "Who the fuck hit that?" And that's how the legend of Mickey Mantle grew. And then Pujols, I think that was 2001, when he pretty much decided he was going to dominate the baseball world for 10 years. He was mashing it in the spring to the point where it became a joke, where Tony La Russa, every time he did a press conference, had to come up with some other vague way to say he hasn't made a roster decision yet. Yes, it's obvious this guy's destroying baseballs. And yeah. So we'll see. He ended up making the roster because Bobby Bonilla got hurt. So it's hilarious to me that there was actually a serious consideration to start 37-year-old Bobby Bonilla over Albert Pujols. But baseball's weird like that sometimes. Obviously, it worked out for the best for the Cardinals that year and moving forward. And I'm not comparing Diaz to these guys. I'm just saying, like, there is the potential for it to be a great situation ultimately for the Indians. One thing that I am frustrated by is the fact that injuries are playing into it at all, that the injuries are affecting it, because Chisenhall's now got a shoulder thing. We know that Kipnis is going to be out. So that corner outfield spot again, we know that Diaz has been doing work in the outfield. Primary position's the infield, of course. He played second base in Cuba, but he's been learning the outfield. So having... I'm looking at the comments here, and I'm going to get to them in a second, you lunatics. Having the flexibility he has, since he's been learning a few different positions, I think, is, again, going to give him a little bit of an edge up here when it comes to possibly making the team. The last 3 games he's played since Thursday, he's picked up a hit in all of them. One of them, he drew another walk. And I'm obviously excited to see what he can do. It's time to find out. I don't think the extra year of control matters that much when somebody's already 25 and is going to turn 26 this year. Play him. Just play him. No, and I agree, Frank. Like, I don't think that the massive home runs by Mantle compare to Diaz slapping singles the opposite way. But someone who could hit 300, 400 at the major league level probably doesn't have any business hanging out in Columbus, even if he's a below-average fielder, which I don't think that he is. The reports about his defense have been that he's working on the technical aspects of it. It's footwork. It's getting used to playing a couple of different positions and getting used to the differences in how you approach a ball in left field compared to third base. Sounds silly, possibly, to think about someone who's been playing their entire life working on small fundamental things like that, but when you've got to be one of the best people in the entire world at doing something, it probably does help to keep going back to basics. I have read over and over again from multiple sources that the tools defensively are all there. He's fast, he's quick, he's got good range and soft hands. It's just a matter of putting it together and getting the experience. Because again, he played second base his entire life in Cuba. He hasn't been playing third base for that long either. So I think that I'm definitely excited to see the kind of growth. I hope that they let him play third, because it does seem like it would be his more natural position. Dude's got a cannon as well, so I could see him moving out to right field at some point. I just think it's going to kind of be like Jose Ramirez was at the beginning of last season, where it got to the point where his bat was so good it didn't matter. Just find a way to get him in the lineup. Jeff from Broadview Heights wants to trade Diaz for that Derek Jeter guy. I think that could work. I don't know if you're familiar with the old scouting report on Derek Jeter, but it just seems like he's the kind of guy that you want on your team, you know? I'm going to see if I can post this picture from one of the broadcasts during his last year, because it really is the best scouting report I've ever seen. No, there it is. Consummate pro and leader, plays the game the right way. Example to players at all levels. This was in a game against the Twins at one point, which is just ridiculous. That's not a scouting report. That's someone, I hope, doing the graphics at Fox was just having some fun, going way over the top. Jerome in Garfield wants to know how many snaps will Yandy see this season. I'd say he'll get 80% of the snaps at wide receiver. I think that probably he'd be a better receiver than anybody on the Browns if they wanted to try him out there. Although the thought of taking a young man with serious promise and exiling him to a team and franchise that's been a runaway disaster since it came back just seems cruel and unusual. I don't think we could do that to him. And yes, we're kind of going into Yandy facts here. Carrie says, doggone it, people like him. Nate says he's also built like a superhero. Yes. He is jacked. I think he's got the broadest shoulders I've ever seen on a baseball player, actually. It's like, if you think Mike Trout looks like a linebacker, then Diaz is basically like a defensive end in terms of stature. Frank wants to know, do I think that Yandy should get an outfield or infield roster spot? I think ultimately where he might end up on the Indians is playing first base. Because I don't know, one, Jesus Aguilar is not really in the picture anymore, I wouldn't think. I don't know that Bobby Bradley can cut down on the strikeouts quite enough, even though the power is like, oh my god, yes. Very technical baseball terms there. There's another guy in the system at first, Nelly Rodriguez. I don't know that much about him, but it doesn't seem like he's, at least from what I've read, necessarily a guy that they expect to contribute on the Major League roster at some point. Oh, so Jesus Aguilar did get traded. That's good to know. Or picked up off waivers or whatever. So he gone. It'll be interesting to see long-term what the Indians do with him, but for this season, I would expect him to end up starting as an infielder. But again, it could be like Jose Ramirez was, where they just need him to fill in a spot at the beginning of the year. He's willing to do it and does. Then he slides over maybe to whatever position the Indians see him playing long term. It'll be a corner, most likely. So whether that's left, right, first, or third, we don't know. But I honestly expect that he'll get up and hit well enough that the team can't justify sending him down at all. There's not really going to be any... I mean, if the Indians had the ability to play him at DH, I don't think there'd be any question at all about whether he'd come up. But given Santana and Encarnacion, if you will, both being on the roster, DH is probably pretty filled up. So yeah, that's the update for the watch. He didn't play today, or at least he has not stepped onto the field yet. They ended up playing Urshela at first, who did pick up another hit, and he's not having a terrible spring. It's just we kind of know what's up with Urshela, where he's a glove-first guy, and we don't know if the bat would ever come around to the point where a team would be comfortable letting him hit 3 to 4 times a game. So, woo! I'm assuming Frank is talking about Willie Mo Pena in terms of the strength. I haven't seen him in a while. I was actually just checking to see. It doesn't look like he played today unless I'm blind, which is possible. Here's just a quick aside. Logan Ice came in to pinch run today for the Indians. He's a catching prospect in the system. Whether or not he makes it, I don't really care. Logan Ice is an amazing name. Generally speaking, I think the Indians have maybe the best farm system at catcher in terms of names. So they've got that going for them. And again, thanks everyone who is watching and has dropped by. Definitely appreciate people hopping on since we wanted to do it at 4 o'clock. It's now 7 o'clock, and there are like tornado sirens or something going on. I should probably be concerned, but I'm just going to ignore it. We've talked a little bit about what we think is going to happen to the opening day roster. There was some news earlier about roster spots and some people getting shifted around here. Mike Clevenger and Joe Colon were both optioned to Columbus, which Clevenger going down I don't think is that surprising because they have said that he's going to end up being a starting pitcher this year. They don't want to use him in bullpen work. Adam Moore, Richie Schaefer, and Bradley Zimmer were all reassigned to minors camp. Again, I think we all expected that Zimmer would start in AAA and that we wouldn't see him. I wouldn't think we'll see him until May at the earliest, and that would probably mean that Tyler Naquin's having a no good, very bad time defensively in center field, which, if anybody has ESPN Insider, I don't, which seems dumb, given that this always happens when there's an article about the Indians on it. There is a piece today talking about the best and worst players this coming season in terms of defensive runs saved, and Naquin is the cover, like the lead to that story, or the player that's highlighted in the headline anyway. No, don't do that. Sorry. My antivirus just decided it wanted to run, so I stopped it. If you have Insider, definitely go check it out. Interestingly, they pointed out that he was one of the best at center field at stopping runners from taking an extra base, but was the worst in overall defensive runs saved last year, which actually makes sense because we know he has a well above average arm, which is why a lot of people predict that he'll end up going to right field at some point, because that is probably his best overall tool, I would say, and especially since Zimmer, if he continues to work on his strikeouts, will probably be the everyday guy there. Although range, I think, was one of the questions with Zimmer, where it's not bad, but he would probably be a fantastic corner outfielder. And at center field, he'll be good, but who knows? Maybe Greg Allen will surprise everyone and hit like 40 home runs in the minors this year. That would be a good problem to have. And Greg makes a good point. Now that we know that Tyler Naquin is Brody's favorite player, probably he's untouchable at this point. I think he'd have to really, really have a bad time for him to get sent down again. I think he played well enough last year, regardless of the fact that his batting average on balls in play was above 400, and he can't hit a high fastball to save his goddamn life. Those are things, I mean, that's something that he can work on. I don't think it's unusual for someone his age to have a hole in their swing like that. I just hope that we see it come around sooner rather than later. It would be nice if we can get first half of the year Tyler Naquin with a little bit better defense as like a sustained thing moving forward. Don't run. Sorry about that. As far as the rest of the spots go, we did get a question in on Twitter from Benno Martins about the last pitching spot. Do we think Sean Armstrong will be in the big league pen on opening day? And this is one I did a little bit of research on earlier. I think he could. Joe Colon going down opens the door to that a little bit more, I think. The question, though, and I'm going to have to look this up right now, is who the other guys are on the roster. I don't know, and I'm asking, I don't know off the top of my head if Ryan Merritt has been optioned yet, but I think he's another case of the Indians wanting to get him reps as a starting pitcher. So not working out of the bullpen or anything like that. Carey does point out that Armstrong had a fantastic spring, which I gotta pull up the numbers here. This is my research face. So I think I saw he had a whip of like 1 dead even and 8 strikeouts through 8 innings of work, which absolutely, yeah, that's a fantastic spring. And again, we're talking about another guy who's 26 years old. So you wonder when the Indians are going to give him that long-term shot. And I think we talked last podcast, actually, a little bit about them having Sean Armstrong up. Everyone was pretty excited about it during September, and then I think he pitched like 2 innings. Yeah, so Merritt is down for AAA. I'm not opposed to it at all. I think that the rest of the bullpen is strong enough that bring up a young guy. Let him have a real crack at it. Because last year at the major league level, he threw 10 innings, was all. Which isn't, I mean, that's barely a cup of coffee, to be perfectly honest. In AAA last season, which is where he spent most of his time, 49 innings, giving up 37 hits and 26 walks, so his whip's right around 1.25. And then given what we've seen from him this spring, it seems like the only thing to be concerned about is he's a little bit walky. Don't even think that's something anyone's ever said before. He gives up a fair number of walks. He was between the majors and AAA last year, giving up 5 per 9, which isn't great. But he also had 13.6 strikeouts per 9. So if he can keep missing bats, that's going to be the key, especially if they see him as being a piece in the bullpen moving forward. I would love it if we still had Fire Eisen, but he, of course, went over to the Yankees to get our good friend. Why can't I think of Andrew Miller's name off the top of my head, and it takes me 2 seconds to remember? That's weird. I would rather have him, of course, but Fire Eisen's kind of looking like he might be the best piece of that deal for the Yankees, because he's got, if I remember correctly, he can touch 100 with the fastball, and it looks like he's ready to go as a reliever in the majors. Whereas earlier today, Clint Frazier, we found out that there's some people in the Yankees organization who don't know whether or not his bat speed is going to translate at the major league level, which would be sad, because it's one of the few times I've heard anybody say that a guy's like 80 out of 80 on bat speed. I think Cashman said it was like supernatural or something. So I hope he works out, but maybe if the Yankees didn't make him cut his damn hair, he wouldn't have had any trouble. Oh, hey, yeah, there is a flood warning. That's great. And there's the siren again. That's not distracting at all. Yeah, I definitely want Clevenger to be that 6th guy. I don't want there to be any injuries to starting pitchers again, but knowing the history of guys like Carrasco and Salazar, I would expect maybe that 6th guy to pick up 10 to 15 starts this year. Hopefully we don't lose that many starts from our number 2 and number 3 guy. But I would rather them be healthy in the postseason this time around than have to force a kid like Ryan Merritt, who pitched a hell of a game in the playoffs, but force him to come up and do that. instead of having Carrasco and Bauer and everyone healthy. And yeah, Nate points out Frazier's value did kind of nosedive after the deal, which if the Indians traded him at his high point, that's fantastic. I still really like him as a player. He seems like he's definitely the kind of player that if he makes it and is good would be, he would sell a lot of jerseys, I think. He seems like he'd be a really popular player. More so if he wasn't on the Yankees, because he would have his glorious flowing locks and beard. The fact that they made him cut his hair is just a travesty. It's a crime against humanity. So, that's about it. We're close to the half-hour mark now, which is usually when I start just rambling and running out of things to say. And that's about where we are now. One sad thing I want to share is that my wonderful Bob Feller bobblehead had a little bit of an accident. Which, what's really stupid is that it had already broken here once, and now the glue broke. So I'm going to have to figure something else out for Mr. Feller. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm going to go make sure I'm not about to die with this siren going off. It turns out it's actually really close to my apartment, so that's great. And that's about it. Have a great night. We are a week away from Major League Baseball. Opening day for the Indians is next Monday. And that's awesome. Oh, God, it's awesome.